begin this morning with Syria and North Korea, two of the world's most complicated and treacherous foreign policy challenges coming to a head at the same time. President Trump is now facing off against two unpredictable and dangerous leaders. Question is, who's going to blink first? We have a really good team here to break it down for you this morning. I want to take you first to NBC's Kristen Welker live at the White House. Kristen, we got to go North Korea first. Firing this missile 36 hours before the president of China is coming to meet with President Trump, and we know Trump has spoken pretty aggressively about China in the past.
Steph, there's no overstating it. This is the president's biggest foreign policy test yet, particularly when you couple it with Syria. So let's take a look at what the administration is saying about North Korea, sort of giving North Korea the silent treatment. This is what Secretary of State Rex Tillerson had to say overnight in a statement. North Korea launched yet another intermediate-range ballistic missile. The United States has spoken enough about North Korea. We have no further comment, underscoring they're not going to engage in every provocation. But this is what a White House official said yesterday during a briefing. The clock has now run out, and all options are on the table for us. Steph, that would indicate they're looking at military options as well. Expect President Trump to press President Xi Jinping when they meet on Friday to turn up the heat on North Korea, to enforce sanctions, and then to make it very clear he's prepared to act unilaterally if China doesn't act. Steph.
All right, we got to ask you about Syria. I cannot believe we're dealing with both of these things in the same day. We know the UN Security Council is going to meet in about an hour to discuss it, but what are we hearing from the White House so far?
Well, the White House talking tough about Syria as well, condemning these attacks in the strongest terms, but also pointing the finger at the former Obama administration. Let me read you the statement from the White House. This from Sean Spicer. These heinous actions by Bashar al-Assad regime are a consequence of the past administration's weakness and irresolution. President Obama said in 2012 that he would establish a red line against the use of chemical weapons, and then did nothing. Worth pointing out that then Mr. Trump at the time urged President Obama not to take military action in Syria. So he's going to get some tough questions about all of this later on today when he meets with the King of Jordan, Steph. The two are going to hold a joint press conference. But again, some critical foreign policy tests on the table here at the White House, Steph.
Without a doubt, I want to stay on Syria. That chemical attack, it's part of a brutal 6-year war where even hospitals, that's right, hospitals are being targeted.
الطيران الحربي يحلق.
We should warn you, there are disturbing images associated with this story. I want to bring in Richard Engel. He's NBC's chief foreign correspondent. Gosh, I'm so upset. Look at this. He's been reporting on this civil war since it began in 2011. Richard, this brutal attack goes on and on. The U.S. at this point has one explanation. Russia has a different one. Please, from your perspective, what is going on when we look at those images? Assad going after his own people, young children in a chemical attack.
Well, it's clear, and it has been clear, that Assad does not consider the rebels to be part of his people. He believes that they are terrorists and that they get what is coming to them. This is probably the second worst alleged chemical attack that has happened in this entire war. According to witnesses and activists, this is what happened. Yesterday, around 6:37 in the morning, an explosion happened. Maybe an artillery shell, maybe something that was dropped from a plane, in the center of a small town in Idlib province, which is not very far from the Turkish border. People immediately started to feel the effects of what they described as a poison gas, foaming at the mouth. People were in paralysis. They described the same kind of effects that would be consistent with a nerve agent. Their pupils turning into pinpoints, muscles, convulsion, heavy sweating. Some people were clearly struggling to breathe. Many died on the spot. And the death toll now is at least 70. Some put the death toll at higher than that, with several hundred people impacted. As the first responders, and you can imagine after 6 years of war, they're not very sophisticated, not very advanced medical facilities, tried to deal with the casualties. They were brought to local clinics, local hospitals, and then one of those clinics was hit in that clip you just showed at the top of this broadcast. Now, what happened. A U.S. intelligence official we've spoken to tells NBC News that while information is still coming in, it looks like this was, in fact, a chemical weapon attack. The Syrian army says that it didn't use chemical weapons, says it would never use chemical weapons, never has, never will. And Russia says that what happened is there was an attack by the Syrian regime on a weapons depot, a terrorist weapons depot, to quote a statement from Moscow, and that toxic substances were released into the air, and that's why you saw those people, including many children, suffering and dying. The people on the ground, however, say that it was clearly from the Assad regime.
All right, Richard, thank you. I want to bring my panel in to break this down. Former Maryland Republican Governor Bob Ehrlich, Jason Johnson, he's a politics editor at Root.com, as well as politics and journalism professor at Morgan State University, and PJ Crowley, former Assistant Secretary of State under President Obama. He is now a professor at George Washington University and the author of Red Line, which discusses the crisis in Syria. So, PJ, clearly, I have to start with you. President Trump's first reaction was to blame President Obama. Amazing that he's not blaming Assad. But the fact of the matter is, President Trump is the person in office right now. He is the one who has to address this. What are his options?
Well, unfortunately, his options are no better than President Obama's options were in 2013. The sad reality is that the survival of Assad, is a vital interest to Russia and Iran. It is, getting rid of Assad has been U.S. policy, but to do that politically, not do that militarily. So, the criticism of the Obama failure to defend its red line is fair. I wrote a book about it. But as to what the Trump administration does, President Trump was elected, to fix America. He wasn't elected to fix Syria. So it's unlikely that the Trump administration is going to take military action to try to impose a solution on Syria.
Governor, to PJ's point, it's PJ's job. It's our job to discuss what the president is doing, how it compares to what President Obama did. But President Trump is the president, and it is important to point out, while he is critical of Obama, back in 2013, President Trump tweeted multiple times that we should stay out of Syria. But how does it reflect on the president today? How does it save the innocent lives of children?
It doesn't.
Children to go after.
It doesn't. It doesn't. It doesn't. It's not the story of the day. It shouldn't be the focal point of your report. It shouldn't be the focal point of the dialogue today. It's about what you just said, and you were emotional. We're all emotional. You can't see those, watch that video without becoming emotional. So looking to the past, taking shots at a predecessor, despite obviously some issues with regard to policies that did not work. That was fair during the campaign. This is about leadership. It's about acting.
Jason, we got to turn. I can't even believe on the same day, now we got to turn to North Korea. We've already heard from the U.S. government that all options are on the table.
Right.
President Trump is about to meet with Xi Jinping at Mar-a-Lago. If that meeting doesn't go well, if they can't find a diplomatic path, what could that mean?
That could endanger the world. Look, we heard lots of very aggressive rhetoric about North Korea during the 2016 campaign, about nuking them, about taking them out. That would embroil us in conflicts with China. That would endanger the economy and the national security of South Korea. That would endanger Japan. Now is the time for sober, realistic foreign policy. And as you mentioned, that may not be the strength of our current president, but if he doesn't engage in some long-term thinking, we're all in danger. What is happening in North Korea right now is not that different from what's happening in Syria. It's a situation where you can't just go in with guns blazing. You got to lose soft power, otherwise we could all be in danger.
And it really hasn't changed much. You're going to run that report with regard to President Reagan,
exactly.
President Clinton, President Bush, President Obama. The storyline never changes. You have three options, right? You really do. You have sanctions, you have the military option, and then you have the China card.
Exactly.
And every president wants to play a China card.
And it doesn't always work.
It hasn't worked at all.
Yeah, exactly,
really.
exactly. Doesn't stop them, but that's the best we can do. And you hope that the president now recognizing that he's got to pat his head and rub his tummy, that this is more than tweeting, that he's got to make these meetings mean something. It can't just be a photo op, because we are now talking about the lives and security of the entire planet when we're engaging with these nations.
PJ, to Jason's point, there have been these meetings, these photo opportunities between President Trump and other other world leaders, but he's not necessarily surrounding himself. We know he doesn't have a tremendous amount of experience, but Rex Tillerson put out a very terse statement as it relates to North Korea. How concerning is that?
Well,
we're giving all of them some space, and they've never done this before.
Well,
look where we are. These are serious times.
There's a logic behind that in the sense that Kim Jong-un is looking for attention. And oh, by the way, this is a gesture that will be embarrassing to President Xi every much as it is a.
So you think it's a good move?
But the reality is that any military option you would consider, they're on the table, but any military option is going to risk hundreds of thousands of deaths, primarily in South Korea, potentially in Japan. To add one item, we may get to the point here where we have to find a way to get to dialogue with North Korea. China will be helpful up to a point. It's not going to push sanctions so far that North Korea implodes. We may well have to just get back. It's not soft power, it's hard power, economic sanctions where you can, but also we may just have to, while we squeeze North Korea, find a way to deter it. Right. They're crazy, they're not stupid, they're not suicidal, and deterrence worked during the Cold War. We may have to use it in the context of North Korea.
How important is this Mar-a-Lago meeting?
It's important for a number of reasons, but obviously North Korea will, given what's happened here, will overshadow every other issue.
And if you thought North Korea, China, and Syria were all things we were focusing on today, it's not true.